The snow falls heavy over Chicago, coating the streets in silver light that only amplifies the feeling of abandonment. In the corner of a nearly empty diner, Elena Rowe passes a worn cloth over the counter with trembling hands, not from cold, but from hunger. 3 months living in shelters, sharing mattresses, bathing when possible, counting coins to buy soap. Life had never been kind to her, but she insisted on surviving. It's in this melancholic silence that the restaurant door opens as if the entire winter had entered with it. Alessandro Devereaux crosses the threshold with the posture of a king in ruins. The head of the city's oldest Mafia family carries in his arms a little girl crying softly, her face buried in a pink coat. Sienna Devereaux, 4 years old, sobs as if her heart were broken. Elena lifts her eyes, and everything inside her quiets. Here was a man who commanded empires but couldn't calm his own daughter. And here was she, who had nothing, watching a powerful man crumble under the weight of fatherhood. The moment their eyes met across that dimly lit diner, both their worlds shifted on their axis. Neither knew that this snowy Chicago night would be the beginning of everything they never dared to dream. Elena had learned to make herself invisible. 3 months of homelessness had taught her that survival meant staying unnoticed, keeping her head down, and never drawing attention to herself. But when Alessandro Devereaux walked into Murphy's diner at 2:47 a.m. with a crying child in his arms, invisibility became impossible. The man filled the doorway like a storm front. Even in the fluorescent lighting that made everyone look sickly, he commanded attention. His black coat was perfectly tailored, his dark hair swept back despite the wind, and his presence made the small diner feel even smaller. But it was the desperation in his movements that caught Elena's breath. "Sir, we're about to close," called Jerry from behind the grill, but his voice wavered when he saw who had entered. Alessandro didn't respond. His attention was entirely focused on the little girl in his arms, whose soft cries had been echoing through the empty restaurant for the past 10 minutes. He moved to a corner booth, his large frame folding awkwardly as he tried to position the child comfortably. Elena watched from behind the counter, her heart clenching. She'd seen that look before, in her own mirror, years ago, the look of someone drowning in their own inadequacy. "Shh, Principessa," Alessandro murmured in accented English, his voice rough with exhaustion. "Papa's here. Papa's here." But Sienna only cried harder, her small fists pushing against his chest. Elena's feet moved before her mind could stop them. She approached the table slowly, her worn sneakers silent against the checkered floor. "Excuse me," she said softly. Alessandro's head snapped up, and Elena felt the full force of his attention like a physical blow. His eyes were the color of dark chocolate, framed by thick lashes that belonged on a Renaissance painting. But there was something wild in them, something desperate that made her chest tight. "We're fine," he said curtly, though Sienna's continued crying suggested otherwise. "I know," Elena replied, her voice gentle, "but she's not." For a moment, they stared at each other across the table. Elena could feel Jerry watching nervously from the kitchen, could sense the tension radiating from the stranger, but all of that faded when she looked at the little girl. Sienna had her father's dark hair but lighter eyes, a warm brown that reminded Elena of autumn leaves. Her cheeks were flushed from crying, and her pink coat was twisted around her small frame. "May I?" Elena asked, extending her hand slightly. Alessandro's jaw tightened. "You don't understand. She won't. Let me try." Something in Elena's voice must have reached him because his grip on Sienna loosened slightly. The little girl turned toward Elena, her crying softening to hiccups. Elena held out her arms, and to everyone's surprise, Sienna leaned toward her. The moment Elena gathered the child against her chest, something shifted in the universe. Sienna's crying stopped almost immediately, replaced by shaky breaths that gradually evened out. Elena began to rock gently, humming a melody her own mother had sung to her a lifetime ago. Alessandro stared as if witnessing a miracle. "How did you—" he started, then stopped. Elena looked down at Sienna, whose eyes were growing heavy. "Sometimes they just need to feel safe." "She hasn't slept through the night in months," Alessandro said quietly. "The nightmares. She wakes up screaming for her mother." Elena's heart clenched. How long? 8 months. His voice was barely above a whisper. Car accident. Maria was coming home from her sister's house when... He stopped abruptly, his jaw working. I'm sorry, Eleanor said, and meant it. They sat in silence for several minutes, Sienna's breathing deepening as she fell asleep in Elena's arms. Alessandro watched them with an expression Elena couldn't read, part wonder, part pain, part something else entirely. What's your name? He asked finally. Elena. Elena Rowe. Alessandro. He paused. Devereaux. Elena's blood chilled. Even living on the streets, she'd heard that name whispered in certain circles. The Devereaux family had run Chicago's underworld for 3 generations, and she was holding the daughter of one of the most dangerous men in the city. Alessandro must have seen the recognition in her eyes because his expression hardened. You should go. I should, Elena agreed, but she didn't move. Sienna was sleeping so peacefully, her small hand fisted in Elena's worn sweater. But you won't, Alessandro observed. She needs this, Elena said simply, and you look like you need a break. For the first time since he'd entered the diner, Alessandro's shoulders relaxed slightly. He leaned back in the booth, studying Elena with those dark, intelligent eyes. You're not afraid of me. I'm terrified of you, Elena admitted, but I'm more afraid of what happens to her if I walk away. Alessandro's expression shifted, something vulnerable flickering across his features before he could hide it. You don't know anything about us. I know enough. Eleanor adjusted Sienna carefully. I know you love her. I know you're doing your best. And I know that sometimes the best isn't enough. The words hung between them, heavy with truth. Jerry cleared his throat from behind the counter. Elena, we really need to close up. Reality crashed back. Elena looked down at Sienna, then back at Alessandro. I should... Don't. The word came out sharper than he'd intended. Alessandro ran a hand through his hair. I mean, could you stay, just until she wakes up? Elena nodded, settling more comfortably in the booth. Alessandro slid out and moved to sit across from her, his eyes never leaving his daughter's sleeping form. Tell me about yourself, he said quietly. Eleanor almost laughed. There's not much to tell. Try me. So she did. In whispered words, she told him about growing up in foster care, aging out of the system at 18, working multiple jobs to put herself through community college. She told him about the layoffs, the eviction, the slow slide from working poor to homeless. She didn't tell him about the nights she'd gone hungry or the men who'd tried to take advantage of her vulnerability. Alessandro listened without judgment, his dark eyes never leaving her face. When she finished, he was quiet for a long moment. And now? He asked. Now I survive, Eleanor said simply. One day at a time. That's not living. It's what I have. Alessandro leaned forward, his voice dropping to barely above a whisper. What if you could have more? Elena's pulse quickened. I don't understand. Sienna hasn't slept like this since her mother died. She hasn't stopped crying for a stranger since... ever. His eyes were intense, burning with something Elena couldn't name. She needs someone who understands her, someone who can give her what I can't. Mr. Devereaux, Alessandro. Alessandro, Elena corrected, her voice shaky. I can't... whatever you're thinking. I'm thinking that my daughter needs a mother, he said bluntly. And you need a home. Elena's breath caught. You don't know me. I know enough. His voice was rough with emotion. I know you put her needs before your own fear. I know you have nothing to gain by helping us, and everything to lose. And I know that in 20 minutes you've given my daughter something I've been trying to give her for 8 months. This is crazy, Elena whispered. Yes, Alessandro agreed. It is. Sienna stirred in Elena's arms, making a small sound of contentment before settling deeper into sleep. Think about it, Alessandro said, pulling out a business card and sliding it across the table. That's my private number. Call me when you decide. Decide what? Alessandro stood, his imposing frame casting shadows across the table. Whether you want to save us both. Elena stared at the business card for 3 days. Alessandro Devereaux, CEO, Devereaux Enterprises. No mention of the family business that everyone whispered about. No hint of the power that made grown men step aside when he walked past. Just a name, a title, and a phone number that felt like a lifeline she was too afraid to grab. She'd returned to the shelter that night, slipping into her narrow cot while the card burned in her pocket. Around her, women snored and whispered and cried softly into their pillows, the familiar sounds of desperation that had become her lullaby. But when she closed her eyes, she saw Sienna's peaceful face, felt the weight of the little girl in her arms, remembered the way Alessandro had looked at them both, like they were something precious he was afraid to break. On Thursday morning, Elena's resolve cracked. She called from a payphone outside the diner, her hands shaking as she dialed the number. Alessandro. His voice was crisp, professional. It's Elena. Elena Rowe. The silence stretched for so long she thought he'd hung up. Elena. When he spoke again, his voice was softer. I wasn't sure you'd call. I wasn't sure either. She twisted the phone cord around her finger. About your offer. Have dinner with us tonight, he interrupted. At my home. Meet Sienna properly, then decide. Elena's mouth went dry. I don't think 7 o'clock, I'll send a car. The line went dead before she could protest. The car that picked her up was a sleek black sedan with tinted windows and a driver who didn't speak. Eleanor sat in the leather back seat, acutely aware of her thrift store dress and worn coat. The city blurred past the windows as they drove north, leaving behind the cramped neighborhoods she knew for tree-lined streets and iron gates. The Devereaux estate sat on Lakeshore Drive, like a fortress of old money and older secrets. The mansion was 3 stories of limestone and arched windows, surrounded by manicured gardens that probably cost more to maintain than most people made in a year. Elena's nerve almost failed her as the car pulled up the circular drive. The front door opened before she could knock. Alessandro stood in the doorway and Elena's breath caught. Gone was the desperate father from the diner. This man wore authority like a second skin, charcoal suit perfectly tailored, dark hair styled, every inch the powerful businessman. But his eyes were the same, dark, intense, and focused entirely on her. Eleanor! He stepped aside to let her enter. Thank you for coming. The foyer was intimidating. Marble floors, crystal chandelier, oil paintings that probably belonged in museums. Elena felt like an imposter in her simple dress and cardigan. This is beautiful, she managed. It's a house, Alessandro said dismissively. Nothing more. Before Eleanor could respond, the sound of small feet on marble echoed through the hall. Papa! Papa, is she here? Sienna appeared at the top of the grand staircase, her dark hair in pigtails, wearing a yellow dress that made her look like a little princess. When she saw Elena, her face lit up with pure joy. Elena! She raced down the stairs, her small arms wrapping around Elena's waist. Elena's heart melted. Hello, sweetheart. I drew you a picture, Sienna announced, grabbing Elena's hand. Come see, come see. Alessandro watched the interaction with an unreadable expression. Dinner first, Principessa, then you can show Elena your artwork. The dining room was as elegant as the rest of the house, long mahogany table, fine china, enough silverware to make Elena nervous. But Sienna's chatter filled the space, making it feel less intimidating. Elena, do you like pasta? Rosa made pasta, and there's bread and salad, and oh, do you want to sit next to me? I'd love to, Elena said, allowing Sienna to guide her to a chair. Alessandro took the seat across from them, and Elena was hyper-aware of his presence throughout the meal. The way he cut Sienna's food without being asked, how he listened patiently to her rambling stories about her day, the gentle way he wiped sauce from her chin. This was a side of him she hadn't seen at the diner, the devoted father beneath the dangerous reputation. Elena, Sienna said around a mouthful of pasta, Papa says you might come live with us. Is that true? Elena nearly choked on her wine. Well, Would you like that? Alessandro asked quietly. Living here? Elena looked around the opulent dining room, then at Sienna's hopeful face, then at Alessandro's intense gaze. It's not that simple. Why not? Because I don't belong here, Elena said honestly. This world, this life, it's not mine. It could be, Alessandro said. After dinner, Sienna dragged Elena to her playroom, a wonderland of toys, books and art supplies that could have stocked a small store. The walls were covered with drawings, and Sienna proudly showed off each one. This is my house, she said, pointing to a crayon drawing of a large building. And this is Papa, a tall figure in black. And this is Mama in heaven, a woman with wings floating above the house. Elena's throat tightened. They're beautiful, sweetheart. And this, Sienna said, pulling out a new drawing, is you. Elena stared at the picture. 3 figures holding hands in front of the house, a tall man, a woman with long hair, and a little girl in the middle. Above them, Sienna had drawn a heart in red crayon. We're a family, Sienna explained matter-of-factly. Papa said families take care of each other. Elena's eyes filled with tears. Sienna, don't you want to be in our family? The innocent question hit Elena like a physical blow. She knelt down to Sienna's level, choosing her words carefully. Sometimes grown-ups have to think about big decisions, she said gently. But I want you to know that meeting you has been one of the best things that's ever happened to me. Sienna threw her arms around Elena's neck. I love you, Elena. I love you too, sweetheart. Over Sienna's head, Elena saw Alessandro standing in the doorway. The raw emotion on his face made her chest tight. Later, after Sienna had been tucked into bed with 3 stories and 2 lullabies, Alessandro led Elena to his study. The room was masculine and warm, leather furniture, floor-to-ceiling bookshelves, a fireplace crackling with real wood. Drink, he offered, moving to a bar cart. Wine, please. He poured 2 glasses of red wine, handing her one before settling into the chair across from hers. The silence stretched between them, heavy with unspoken words. She's amazing, Elena said finally. She is. Alessandro's voice was soft. She's also broken. Children are resilient. Not like this. He set down his wineglass, leaning forward. She hasn't spoken her mother's name since the funeral. She won't sleep alone. She has nightmares where she screams for Maria to come back. His voice cracked slightly. I don't know how to fix her. Elena's heart ached for both of them. You can't fix grief, Alessandro. You can only help her carry it. I've tried everything. Therapists, specialists, changing her room, keeping everything the same. Nothing works. He ran his hands through his hair. But tonight, she laughed. Really laughed. I haven't heard that sound in 8 months. She just needs time. She needs a mother, Alessandro said bluntly. And I need... He stopped, shaking his head. What do you need? Alessandro looked at her for a long moment, his dark eyes searching her face. I need to know that she'll be okay, that someone will love her the way Maria did, that if something happens to me, she won't be alone. The weight of his words settled between them. Elena understood now. This wasn't just about Sienna needing a caregiver. This was about a father's desperate need to protect his child in a world where his very existence put her at risk. Your world, Elena said carefully. It's dangerous. Yes. And you're asking me to step into that danger. I'm asking you to help me build something better. Alessandro leaned forward, his intensity making the air between them electric. I have money, Elena. More than you could spend in 10 lifetimes. I have power, connections, resources, but I can't give Sienna what she needs most, which is a mother's love, safety, a normal life. His voice dropped to barely above a whisper. You. Elena's pulse quickened. Alessandro. I know it's insane. I know I'm asking the impossible, but I've watched you with her, Elena. I've seen how she responds to you. You're not just good with children, you're good with her, specifically her. Elena stood abruptly, moving to the window that overlooked the lake. The water was dark, reflecting the lights of the city like scattered diamonds. What exactly are you proposing? She asked without turning around. Marriage. The word hung in the air like a challenge. Elena spun to face him. You can't be serious. Alessandro rose from his chair, moving toward her with predatory grace. "I'm completely serious. You don't even know me. I know enough." He stopped just close enough that she could smell his cologne, something expensive and masculine that made her head spin. "I know you're brave, I know you're kind. I know you put others before yourself, even when you have nothing to give. That's not enough for marriage, isn't it?" Alessandro's voice was rough. "Most marriages are built on less." Elena shook her head. "This is crazy." "Yes," he agreed, stepping closer. "It is." The space between them crackled with tension. Elena could feel the heat radiating from his body, could see the flecks of gold in his dark eyes. When he reached up to touch her face, she didn't pull away. "Elena," he said softly, his thumb tracing her cheekbone, "I'm not asking you to love me. I'm asking you to save my daughter, and in return, I'll give you everything you've never had." "Which is?" "Security, stability, a home." His voice dropped to a whisper. "A family." Elena's breath caught. "And if I say no?" Alessandro's hand dropped to his side. "Then you walk away, and we never see each other again." The thought of never seeing Sienna again made Elena's chest tight. The little girl had already carved out a space in her heart, and the idea of abandoning her felt like a betrayal. "I need time to think," Elena said. "Of course." Alessandro stepped back, giving her space to breathe. "But Elena." "Yes?" "Don't take too long. Sienna's already planning your room." Elena said yes on a Tuesday morning, standing in the same payphone where she'd first called Alessandro. Her decision had been made the moment she'd seen Sienna's drawing of their family, but it had taken her 3 sleepless nights to find the courage to voice it. "I'll do it," she said when Alessandro answered. "I'll marry you." The silence on the other end stretched so long, she thought the connection had been lost. "Alessandro." "I'm here." His voice was rough, as if he'd been holding his breath. "Are you sure?" "No," Elena admitted, "but I'm doing it anyway. I'll have papers drawn up, a prenup to protect your interests." "I don't want your money," Elena interrupted. "Elena, I want Sienna to be happy, that's all." Another pause. "We'll discuss terms tonight. Dinner at 7? "Okay." "Elena?" "Yes?" "Thank you." The line went dead, leaving Elena staring at the phone with the strange sensation that she'd just agreed to jump off a cliff. The next few weeks passed in a blur of preparations that felt more like a business merger than a wedding. Lawyers, contracts, background checks that made Elena's cheeks burn with embarrassment. Alessandro was thorough, professional, and completely overwhelming, but it was the quiet moments that undid her. Like when she found him reading to Sienna in the library, his deep voice bringing fairy tale characters to life, while his daughter curled against his side. Or when he carried Sienna to bed after she fell asleep during a movie, his large hands impossibly gentle as he tucked her in. Eleanor had moved into the mansion a week before the wedding, into a guest room that was larger than any apartment she'd ever lived in. The staff treated her with polite deference, but she could see the questions in their eyes. Who was this woman who'd appeared from nowhere to marry their boss? Rosa, the housekeeper who'd been with the family for 20 years, was the most direct. "You love that little girl," she observed one afternoon, finding Elena in the kitchen helping Sienna make cookies. "Yes," Elena said simply. "And Mr. Devereaux." Elena's hands stilled on the cookie dough. "It's complicated." Rosa studied her with knowing eyes. "Love usually is." The wedding was small, held in the mansion's garden with only immediate family and a handful of close friends. Elena wore a simple white dress that Alessandro had insisted on buying, though she'd protested the expense. Sienna was the flower girl, practically glowing with excitement as she scattered rose petals down the makeshift aisle. Alessandro looked devastating in his black tuxedo, his dark hair perfectly styled, his expression unreadable as Elena walked toward him. But when their eyes met, something flickered in his gaze that made her pulse quicken. The ceremony was brief, perfunctory. They exchanged vows that spoke of commitment and partnership, but not love. When the officiant pronounced them husband and wife, Alessandro's kiss was soft, almost hesitant, a seal on their agreement rather than a declaration of passion. But Elena felt it anyway. The spark that jumped between them when his lips touched hers, the way her heart stuttered when his hand cupped her face, the dangerous pull that she'd been trying to ignore for weeks. "Mama Elena, Mama Elena." Sienna threw herself at Elena the moment the kiss ended, her small arms wrapping around Elena's waist. Elena's eyes filled with tears. "Hello, my sweet girl." Over Sienna's head, she met Alessandro's gaze. The raw emotion on his face made her breath catch. This was real now. They were a family. That night, after the guests had gone home and Sienna had been tucked into bed with promises of a family vacation, Elena stood in her new bedroom, the master suite she now shared with Alessandro. The room was elegant but masculine, all dark wood and rich fabrics. Elena felt like an intruder as she unpacked her few belongings into the massive walk-in closet. "Second thoughts?" Alessandro's voice came from behind her. Elena turned to find him leaning against the doorframe, his tuxedo jacket discarded, his white shirt open at the collar. He looked tired but satisfied, like a man who'd accomplished something important. "A few," Elena admitted. "About the marriage or about me?" Elena considered the question. "About whether I'm enough." Alessandro pushed off from the doorframe, moving toward her with that predatory grace that made her pulse quicken. "Enough for what?" "For this, for her, for—" She gestured helplessly around the opulent room. "Elena." Alessandro stopped in front of her, his dark eyes serious. "You're more than enough. You're everything." The words hung between them, heavy with meaning. Elena's breath caught as Alessandro reached up to touch her face, his thumb tracing the line of her cheekbone. "This doesn't have to be anything you don't want it to be," he said softly. "We can take this as slowly as you need." But Elena didn't want slow. The attraction that had been building between them for weeks was threatening to consume her, and the gentle way he was touching her face was making it impossible to think clearly. "Alessandro," she whispered. "Yes?" "Kiss me. Really kiss me this time." Something dark and hungry flashed in his eyes. "Elena, please." He didn't need to be asked twice. His mouth claimed hers with a desperation that stole her breath, his hands tangling in her hair as he pulled her against him. Elena melted into the kiss, her arms wrapping around his neck as she gave herself over to the fire that had been building between them. When they finally broke apart, both were breathing hard. "Elena," Alessandro said, his voice rough with desire. "I know," she whispered against his lips. "I know this is supposed to be just an arrangement, but I can't. I don't want to pretend anymore." Alessandro's arms tightened around her. "Neither do I." This time when he kissed her, it was with the promise of everything they could be together. Elena lost herself in the sensation of his mouth on hers, his hands on her body, the way he whispered her name like a prayer. When he lifted her in his arms and carried her to their bed, Elena knew there was no going back. This marriage might have started as a business arrangement, but it was becoming something else entirely, something real, something worth fighting for. 3 months into their marriage, Elena had almost convinced herself that happiness was possible. Sienna was thriving, sleeping through the night, laughing freely, calling Elena Mama without hesitation. Alessandro was attentive, protective, and passionate in ways that made Elena's head spin. The dangerous world he moved in felt distant, manageable. She should have known it wouldn't last. The threat came on a Thursday morning in the form of a phone call that made Alessandro's face go stone cold. "Take Sienna to your sister's," he told Rosa without preamble. "Now." "Alessandro, what's wrong?" Elena asked, but he was already moving, his phone pressed to his ear as he barked orders in rapid Italian. Within an hour, Sienna was safely away from the house, confused but excited about an impromptu sleepover with her cousin. Elena watched the car disappear down the drive with a growing sense of unease. "Tell me what's happening," she demanded, when Alessandro returned to the house. "Business," he said curtly. "Nothing for you to worry about." "Don't lie to me." Elena grabbed his arm as he tried to walk past her. "I'm your wife now. I have a right to know when we're in danger." Alessandro's jaw tightened. We're not in danger. I am. That's the same thing. For a moment, they stared at each other in the marble foyer. Elena could see the war playing out behind Alessandro's dark eyes, the desire to protect her warring with the knowledge that she deserved the truth. "Victor Kozlov," he said finally. "He's an old business partner. We had a disagreement years ago." "What kind of disagreement?" "The kind that ends with someone dead." Elena's blood chilled. "And he's coming here?" "He's already here." Alessandro's phone buzzed, and he glanced at it with a grimace. "His men are at the gates." Elena's mind raced. "Call the police." "The police can't help with this." Alessandro cupped her face in his hands, his touch gentle despite the tension radiating from his body. "Elena, I need you to go upstairs. Lock yourself in the safe room behind our closet. Don't come out until I come for you." "I'm not leaving you." "You are." His voice was steel wrapped in velvet. "This is not a discussion." Before Elena could protest further, the front door exploded inward. 3 men in dark suits entered like shadows made flesh. The one in front was tall and lean with pale eyes that reminded Elena of winter ice. Victor Kozlov, she realized with a chill. "Alessandro," Victor said in accented English, his voice cultured and cold. "You've been avoiding my calls." "Victor." Alessandro stepped slightly in front of Elena, his body a shield between her and the intruders. "This is my home. You're not welcome here." Victor's pale eyes found Elena, and his smile was razor-sharp. "And this must be the new wife. How lovely." "Leave her out of this," Alessandro said, his voice deadly quiet. "Oh, but she's very much a part of this now, isn't she?" Victor moved deeper into the foyer, his men flanking him. "You see, Alessandro, when you chose to break our agreement, you made this personal." "Our agreement died with Maria," Alessandro said. "I told you I was out. And I told you that no one leaves the family business, not even you." The tension in the room was suffocating. Elena could feel violence hanging in the air like a storm about to break. "What do you want?" Alessandro asked. "What I've always wanted. Your territory, your connections, your complete cooperation." Victor's smile turned predatory. "And now, thanks to your lovely wife, I have the perfect leverage." "Touch her and I'll kill you," Alessandro said conversationally, but Elena could hear the promise of death in his voice. "Such passion," Victor mused. "It's almost romantic." What happened next occurred in seconds that felt like hours. Victor nodded to his men. Alessandro moved with lethal grace, his hand reaching for the gun Elena hadn't known he carried. The sound of gunfire exploded through the mansion. Elena screamed, diving behind the marble staircase as chaos erupted around her. She heard Alessandro shouting orders, heard the sharp crack of bullets hitting stone, heard the heavy thud of bodies hitting the floor. Then suddenly, silence. Elena crouched behind the staircase, her heart hammering so hard she thought it might burst. The silence stretched, broken only by the sound of her own ragged breathing. "Elena." Alessandro's voice, rough but alive. She peered around the staircase to find him standing in the middle of the foyer, his white shirt torn and bloodied, his dark hair disheveled. Victor and his men were gone. Whether dead or fled, Elena couldn't tell. "Are you hurt?" Alessandro asked, moving toward her with urgent steps. Elena shook her head, unable to find her voice. When Alessandro reached her, he pulled her into his arms with desperate force, his hands running over her body as if checking for injuries. "I'm okay," Elena managed. "I'm okay." "I'm sorry," Alessandro said against her hair. "I'm so fucking sorry. This should never have happened. You should never have been exposed to this." Elena pulled back to look at his face. There was blood on his cheek, and his eyes were wild with adrenaline and fear. "Is it over?" she asked. "For now." Alessandro's jaw tightened. "But Victor won't stop. He'll keep coming until one of us is dead." "Then what do we do?" Alessandro cupped her face in his hands, his touch infinitely gentle despite the violence that had just erupted around them. "I end this," he said quietly, "once and for all." "How?" "By giving him what he wants." Elena's heart stopped. "You're not leaving us." "No," Alessandro said fiercely. Never. But I am leaving that world behind completely. Victor can have the territory, the business connections, all of it. I don't care anymore. Alessandro, I almost lost you today, he said, his voice breaking slightly. I almost lost everything that matters to me because I was too proud to walk away from a life I never wanted in the first place. Eleanor's eyes filled with tears. You'd give up everything? For us? Eleanor. Alessandro's thumbs wiped away her tears. You and Sienna are everything. The rest is just noise. He kissed her then, desperate and hungry and full of promises. Elena melted into him, tasting fear and relief and love on his lips. I love you, she whispered against his mouth. Alessandro went still. What? I love you, Elena repeated, louder this time. I love you, Alessandro Devereaux. Not your money, not your power, not your name. You. The man who reads bedtime stories and makes terrible pancakes and would burn the world down to keep his daughter safe. Alessandro's eyes closed as if her words caused him physical pain. Elena. I know this started as an arrangement. I know you married me for Sienna. But somewhere along the way it became real for me. You became real for me. When Alessandro opened his eyes, they were bright with unshed tears. I love you too, he said roughly. God help me, I love you so much it terrifies me. Then we'll figure this out, Elena said firmly. Together. Alessandro nodded, pulling her close again. Together. In the distance, sirens wailed as Alessandro's security team dealt with the aftermath of Victor's visit. But Elena barely heard them. All that mattered was the man holding her, the family they'd built, and the future they were going to fight for. Whatever came next, they would face it together. 6 months later, Eleanor stood in the kitchen of their new home in Napa Valley, watching through the window as Alessandro pushed Sienna on the swing he'd built in their backyard. The little girl's laughter carried on the warm California air, a sound that still made Elena's heart swell with joy. The mansion in Chicago was a memory now, sold along with most of Alessandro's business interests. Victor Kozlov had gotten what he wanted: territory, connections, power. In return, Alessandro had gotten something far more valuable: freedom. The wine business had been a natural transition. Alessandro's legitimate investments had always included several vineyards, and he'd thrown himself into the work with the same intensity he'd once reserved for darker pursuits. Eleanor had never seen him happier than when he was walking through the vines at sunset, dirt under his fingernails and peace in his eyes. "Mama, Eleanor," Sienna called from the yard. "Come push me too." "In a minute, sweetheart," Elena called back, smiling as she finished arranging flowers in a vase. The sound of footsteps on the hardwood floor made her turn. Alessandro appeared in the kitchen doorway, his hair tousled from playing outside, his white shirt rolled up at the sleeves. Even after all these months, the sight of him still made her pulse quicken. "She's getting tired," he said, moving to wrap his arms around Eleanor from behind. "But she's determined to stay awake until you come outside." Elena leaned back against his chest, savoring the warmth of his body and the steady beat of his heart. "She's been excited about the picnic all week." "And you?" Alessandro's lips brushed against her ear. "Are you excited?" Eleanor turned in his arms, studying his face. There was something different in his expression, nervous energy mixed with anticipation. "What are you up to, Alessandro Devereaux?" "Nothing," he said innocently, but Elena could see the lie in his dark eyes. "Uh-huh." She stood on her tiptoes to kiss him softly. "Well, whatever it is, I love you." "I love you too," Alessandro murmured against her lips. "More than you know." The picnic spot Alessandro had chosen was perfect, a hilltop overlooking the valley, with views of rolling vineyards and distant mountains. Elena spread the blanket while Sienna ran in circles, her energy seemingly endless despite the long day. "This is beautiful," Elena said, settling onto the blanket with a contented sigh. "It is," Alessandro agreed, but when Elena looked at him, he was watching her instead of the view. They ate sandwiches and fruit while Sienna chatted about her day at school, her new friends, and the butterfly she'd found in the garden. As the sun began to set, painting the sky in shades of pink and gold, Sienna finally began to wind down. "Tell me a story, Papa," she said, curling up between Elena and Alessandro on the blanket. "What kind of story?" Alessandro asked, stroking his daughter's dark hair. "A love story," Sienna said decisively. "Like yours and Mama Elena's." Elena's cheeks warmed. Even at 5 years old, Sienna was remarkably perceptive about the relationship between her parents. "Once upon a time," Alessandro began, his voice taking on the cadence of a fairy tale, "there was a man who thought he had everything he needed. He had a beautiful daughter, a big house, and more money than he could ever spend. But he wasn't happy," Sienna added, having heard variations of this story before. "No, he wasn't happy," Alessandro agreed, "because the most important thing was missing." "What was missing?" Sienna asked, even though she knew the answer. "Love," Alessandro said simply. "Real love, the kind that makes you want to be better than you are." Elena's throat tightened with emotion. Alessandro had a way of making even their unconventional beginnings sound romantic. "And then what happened?" Sienna prompted. "Then one snowy night he met a woman who changed everything," Alessandro continued. "She was brave and kind and beautiful, and she saw something good in him that he'd forgotten was there." "And they fell in love," Sienna said with satisfaction. "Yes," Alessandro said, his eyes meeting Elena's over their daughter's head. "They fell in love." As Sienna's breathing evened out in sleep, Alessandro carefully moved her to a smaller blanket, tucking her in with practiced ease. The little girl didn't stir, exhausted from the day's adventures. "She'll sleep for hours," Alessandro said, settling back beside Elena on the main blanket. "Good," Elena murmured, curling into his side. "This is perfect." They lay in comfortable silence, watching the stars appear in the darkening sky. Elena had never felt more content, more at peace with her life and choices. "Elena," Alessandro said eventually. "There's something I want to ask you." Something in his tone made Elena lift her head to look at him. "What is it?" Alessandro sat up, reaching into his pocket. When his hand emerged, he was holding a small velvet box. Elena's breath caught. "Alessandro, I know we're already married," he said quickly. "I know we did this backwards, starting with a contract instead of love. But I want to do it right this time." He opened the box to reveal a stunning diamond ring, the stone catching the last rays of sunlight and throwing rainbows across the blanket. "Elena Devereux," Alessandro said, his voice rough with emotion. "Will you marry me? Not because you need a home or because Sienna needs a mother, but because you love me and I love you, and I want to spend the rest of my life proving that I deserve you." Elena's eyes filled with tears. "Alessandro, I know I'm not the man you dreamed of marrying," he continued. "I know my past is complicated and dangerous, but I swear to you, Elena, I will spend every day of my life making sure you never regret taking a chance on us." "Yes," Elena whispered. "Yes, yes, I'll marry you," Elena said, laughing through her tears. "Again and again and again, if that's what it takes to convince you that I choose you. Not your money, not your protection, not even for Sienna. I choose you, Alessandro. Just you." Alessandro's hands shook as he slipped the ring onto her finger. It fit perfectly, sparkling in the starlight like a promise made real. "I love you," he said, pulling her into his arms. "I love you too," Elena replied, just before his mouth claimed hers in a kiss that tasted like forever. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Alessandro rested his forehead against hers. "So," he said with a grin that made him look years younger. "Want to have a real wedding this time?" Elena laughed. "As long as Sienna can be the flower girl again. Wouldn't dream of having it any other way." As if summoned by her name, Sienna stirred on her blanket, blinking sleepily at them. "Are you getting married again?" she asked with 5-year-old directness. "Yes, sweetheart," Elena said. "Is that okay with you?" Sienna sat up, suddenly wide awake. "Can I have a new dress?" "Of course," Alessandro said solemnly. "And can we have cake?" "The biggest cake you've ever seen," Elena promised. "And can I call you Mama Elena forever and ever?" Elena's heart swelled. Forever and ever. Sienna clapped her hands with delight. This is the best day ever. As their daughter launched into detailed plans for the wedding, Elena caught Alessandro's eye. He was watching them both with an expression of wonder, as if he couldn't quite believe this was his life. Elena understood the feeling. A year ago she'd been homeless and hopeless, convinced that happiness was something that happened to other people. Now she was sitting under the stars with the man she loved and the daughter of her heart, planning a future that was brighter than anything she'd ever dared to dream. "Thank you," she mouthed to Alessandro over Siena's head. "For what?" he mouthed back. "For saving me." Alessandro shook his head, his dark eyes serious. "You saved me, Elena. You saved us both." And as Siena continued her excited chatter about wedding plans, Elena knew he was right. They had saved each other, the broken man, the lost woman, and the little girl who had brought them together. They were a family now, bound not by contracts or convenience, but by love. Real, messy, complicated, beautiful love, the kind that lasted forever. 2 years later, Elena woke to the sound of laughter drifting through the open bedroom windows. She stretched lazily in the California king bed, her hand automatically reaching for Alessandro's side of the mattress. Finding it empty but still warm, she smiled and padded to the window. In the garden below, Alessandro was chasing 7-year-old Siena around the fountain, while their 6-month-old son, Marco, watched from his bouncy seat in the shade. Siena's delighted shrieks filled the air as her father caught her and spun her around, both of them collapsing in a heap on the grass. "Careful with your sister," Elena called down, one hand resting on her rounded belly where their third child grew. Alessandro looked up, his face lighting up when he saw her. Even after 3 years of marriage, 2 ceremonies as promised, he still looked at her like she was a miracle he couldn't quite believe. "Morning, beautiful," he called back. "Sleep well?" "Better now," Elena replied, already missing the warmth of his arms. "Mama Elena," Siena waved enthusiastically. "Come play with us." "Let me get dressed first, sweetheart." Elena showered quickly and pulled on a sundress that accommodated her growing bump. At 5 months pregnant, she was just starting to show, and Alessandro couldn't keep his hands off her belly. Their son Marco had been a surprise, a wonderful one that had sent Alessandro into protective overdrive for months. This pregnancy was planned, wanted, celebrated. A little girl, according to the ultrasound, who would complete their family in ways Elena was still trying to wrap her mind around. Downstairs, she found Rosa in the kitchen, preparing breakfast with the efficiency of someone who'd been managing the Devereaux household for over 20 years. "Good morning, Mrs. Elena," Rosa said warmly. "Mr. Alessandro made coffee, but I made you tea." "You're an angel," Elena said, accepting the cup gratefully. "How's our little prince this morning?" "Perfect, as always," Rosa said, beaming. "He has his father's temperament, calm until he wants something, then very determined to get it." Elena laughed. "That sounds about right." Through the kitchen window, she could see Alessandro now lying on the grass with Marco on his chest, while Siena braided flowers into a crown. The sight made her heart swell with contentment. "Mrs. Elena." Rosa's voice was gentle. "Are you happy?" Elena turned to find the older woman watching her with knowing eyes. It wasn't the first time Rosa had asked this question, and Elena suspected it wouldn't be the last. The housekeeper had been protective of Alessandro and Siena long before Elena arrived, and her approval had meant everything. "Completely," Elena said honestly. "Are you?" Rosa smiled. "I have never seen Mr. Alessandro like this. Peaceful. The darkness that used to follow him everywhere. It's gone now." Elena nodded. The man who'd once commanded fear throughout Chicago's underworld now spent his days making wine and his evenings reading bedtime stories. The transformation had been gradual, but complete. "He's a good man," Elena said. "He is now," Rosa agreed. "You made him good." Before Elena could respond, the kitchen door burst open and Siena ran in, her flower crown slightly askew. "Mama Elena, Papa says we can go to the beach today if you feel up to it." "I feel wonderful," Elena assured her, catching Siena in a hug. "But first, breakfast." Alessandro appeared in the doorway with Marco in his arms, the baby gurgling happily at his father. The sight of her husband with their son never failed to make Elena's heart skip. Alessandro was such a natural father, patient and gentle in ways that still surprised people who'd known him before. "Good morning, wife," he murmured, leaning down to kiss her softly. "Good morning, husband," Elena replied, savoring the taste of coffee and contentment on his lips. "How are my girls?" Alessandro asked, his free hand coming to rest on Elena's belly. "We're perfect," Elena said, covering his hand with hers, "although she's been very active this morning." "She's going to be a handful," Alessandro predicted with obvious pride, "just like her sister." "Hey!" Sienna protested. "I'm not a handful." "You're the best handful in the world," Alessandro said solemnly, making Sienna giggle. As they settled around the kitchen table for breakfast, a far cry from the formal dining room meals of their early days, Elena marveled at how normal this felt, how right. 3 years ago she'd been homeless and hopeless. Now she was surrounded by love, laughter, and the promise of more beautiful chaos to come. "What are you thinking about?" Alessandro asked quietly, noticing her contemplative mood. "Just this," Elena said, gesturing around the table where Sienna was making faces at Marco and Rosa was fussing over everyone's plates. "How did we get so lucky?" Alessandro's expression grew serious. "It wasn't luck, Elena. It was choice. Every day we choose this. We choose each other." "And I'll keep choosing you," Elena said softly. "Forever." "Forever," Alessandro agreed, lifting her hand to kiss the wedding ring that had replaced the simple band from their first ceremony. "Ew, you're being mushy again," Sienna announced, but she was smiling. "Get used to it, Principessa," Alessandro said. "I plan to be mushy with your mama for the next 60 years. 60 years? Sienna's eyes widened. "That's like forever." "Exactly," Elena said, meeting Alessandro's gaze across the table. Forever. It had a nice ring to it. Later that evening, after a day at the beach and dinner on the terrace, Elena found herself in the nursery they were preparing for their daughter. Alessandro had insisted on painting the walls himself, a soft lavender that complemented the white furniture and yellow accents. "She's going to love it," Alessandro said from behind her. Elena leaned back against his chest, his arms coming around to cradle her belly. "Do you think we're crazy? 3 kids in 3 years?" "Completely," Alessandro said without hesitation, "but the best kind of crazy." Elena laughed. "Sienna's already planning to teach her everything she knows." "God help us all," Alessandro muttered, making Elena laugh harder. They stood in comfortable silence, watching the sunset paint the nursery in shades of gold and pink. In the distance, they could hear Sienna singing to Marco as Rosa helped her get him ready for bed. "Alessandro," Elena said eventually. Thank you." "For what?" Elena turned in his arms, studying the face she'd grown to love so completely. "For seeing something in me that I couldn't see in myself. For giving me a family. For choosing love over everything else." Alessandro's hands cupped her face with infinite tenderness. "Elena, you gave me everything. A reason to be better. A reason to hope. A reason to believe that maybe I deserved happiness after all." "You do," Elena said fiercely. "You deserve all of it." "We deserve it," Alessandro corrected. "All of us. This beautiful, chaotic, perfect family we've built together." He kissed her then, soft and sweet and full of promises for all the tomorrows stretching ahead of them. When they broke apart, Elena rested her forehead against his, breathing in the scent of his cologne mixed with sunshine and sea salt from their day at the beach. "I love you, Alessandro Devereux," she whispered. "And I love you, Elena Devereux," he replied, "forever and always." From down the hall came the sound of Sienna's voice calling for them. "Mama, Elena, Papa, Marco wants you to sing the goodnight song." Elena and Alessandro looked at each other and smiled. Their life was full of interruptions, chaos, and the beautiful messiness of a growing family. It was nothing like the quiet, controlled existence Alessandro had once known, or the lonely survival Elena had endured. It was so much better. Hand in hand, they walked toward the sound of their children's voices, toward the bedtime rituals and whispered conversations and gentle chaos that had become their world. Toward the life they'd chosen together. Not perfect, but perfectly theirs. In the master bedroom that night, as Alessandro held Elena close while she drifted off to sleep, He thought about the man he'd been before she walked into that diner. Cold, isolated, going through the motions of living without really being alive. Now with his wife's head on his shoulder, and their son sleeping peacefully in the nursery, and their daughter dreaming of beaches and baby sisters, Alessandro Devereux finally understood what it meant to be truly wealthy. It had nothing to do with money or power or fear. It had everything to do with love. And as Elena's breathing evened out in sleep, one hand resting protectively over their unborn daughter, Alessandro pressed a kiss to her hair and whispered the words that had become his nightly prayer. "Thank you for saving us all." Outside their window, the California stars shone down on the vineyard, where a former Mafia boss grew grapes instead of empires, where a once homeless woman had found her forever home, and where a little girl who'd lost her mother had gained a family that would never let her go. It was, by any measure, a perfect ending, but for the Devereux family, it was really just the beginning.